And that's ultimately how I got on the Forbes list. When people talk to me about how I grew my business and how we grew our outreach, it was through video. It was through YouTube. It was through podcasting. I think podcasting has like changed my life. We never went viral or any of those things. It's just good, consistent content consistently, right? Like we just kept putting out information that people needed, that was helpful from a place that was relatable and that made them feel seen, heard, and valued, and that tangibly changed their lives, right? Like you get the right information, you can get into the right school, your life can be changed. My life was completely changed by the schools and the education that I got. You know, now our podcast, you know, we're one of the best 15 or best 10, I think, law school admission podcasts on, you know, Spotify and all those kind of things. But it didn't start that way. It just started as like, I'm just going to keep putting the content out and we're going to see what happens.
Hey, Sydney, how are you? I'm so happy to have you here on the Brave on Video podcast today. I'm super excited and super ecstatic. If you're not watching the video version of the podcast and you're hearing me, I'm just letting you guys know I am cheesing right now because I have Sydney Montgomery as our guest on the podcast today. And I'm super excited. How are you, Sydney?
I'm doing well. It's been a really good month, to be honest. So I'm really doing well, and I'm excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Okay, now I'm curious, what makes this month like so good for you?
Well, I turned 30 at the end of last month.
Okay.
So this is my first month being 30.
And how does it feel being 30?
You know, it's interesting. I think everyone always says your 30s are better. But I also immediately left to go to the Forbes International Women's 30-50 Summit in Abu Dhabi. And then I was in Nepal for another summit. So I spent the first 2 weeks abroad. This is actually my first, I guess, full week back in the United States. But it's been really eye-opening. I've had a lot of clarity. I've had a lot of just faith moments, God moments. So I'm excited. A lot of changes, but I think for the best.
I love that. Okay, so you just said Forbes. We were saying that you turned 30. We will talk about Forbes 30 under 30 in a few because I'm super excited to talk about that. But I just want to go back, like your life now compared to your life, I would say 5 years ago. What was the difference?
Well,
different person. Tell us more about you and how you started. Like, take us back a few years ago.
Well, 5 years ago, I was a lawyer. Well, I guess 5 years ago, I was a law clerk. So not even really a lawyer. I mean, I just feel like I've lived a lot of lives in the last 5 years. Yeah, so I graduated Harvard Law School in 2018. I clerked for a judge on a family and civil court rotation in Montgomery County, Maryland, where I'm from, in 2019. And then I guess at the end of 2019, I started as a junior associate at a family law firm, where I mostly handled custody, divorce, mediation issues, which is what I had wanted to be since I was 8. So I was like very consistent. I was like, when I grow up, I'm going to be a family lawyer. Became a family lawyer. But I had also been working with students kind of on the side with their college admissions. At that point, I was actually only doing college admissions. I did a little bit of law school admissions, but primarily I did college admission counseling. And it wasn't until 2020, around the time when the pandemic hit, that I ended up pivoting full-time into educational consulting. I actually God pushed me into educational consulting. I when you say pivot, it made it sound like I had this great idea to leave my job, but God had to push me. And I feel like from then, that was the year that I met you, Zaylee. I started watching your lives on Facebook, and I found Thinkific and Think in Color, and really started my entrepreneurial journey. And I feel like it's been kind of crazy in a good way, in a crazy way, an interesting way since then.
It's so insane. Anytime I hear your story, I mean, first of all, all praises to God, just like you said, let's reel it back in. And just remember that it seems like a miracle just how much your life has changed and how much you've been able to accomplish, but also how much you've gone through, how many lessons you've learned. how many blessings you've received. It's kind of crazy. I feel like even the time that you're speaking about that I've known you, like you said, it's been like a few lives well,
Yeah.
and it's kind of wild. And just super grateful to be on such a ride with someone like you, you know? It's,
Yeah.
yeah, so crazy. Okay. So
Yeah.
you gave us a bit about like how you got started and how you moved from college admissions to law school admissions, and you've now grown so much.
Yeah. So I, yeah. So when I started working with you, I was doing admissions consulting work. I actually had no intentions of doing law school consulting, which is the wild part about it because that's what we're known for. So I run the Barry Breakers nonprofit, and we specialize in working with first gen minority and immigrant college and law school applicants. We've helped about 7,000 students across the country and internationally. And I had no intention of doing law school consulting, which I think is like 85% of our practice at this point. But I ended up on a podcast in 2020, and there really aren't that many Black women law school consultants. There aren't that many women of color in general law school consultants, especially that are focused on the lived experiences of first gen and lower income students and applicants, non traditional students. And so that year, I think I ended up working with probably like 70 students, and it just really exploded. And I also then, so that was like 2020, 2021, continued to explode, created group programs, created my first course with you, Zaylee. So really leveraged digital content. And then in 2022, launched an edtech software platform, which became its own company called Outline It. And it ended up really serving K-12 students at the intersection of being racially marginalized and being neurodiverse. So I have ADHD. And my sister does too. And so just really working with students on how to better structure their essays. It was the work that we had been doing in admissions advising, but in a way that was tangible for students in high school and middle school as they were just learning their writing craft. And then God called me to seminary. So I went to seminary with all of this and ended up getting the real inspiration from the Holy Spirit that I should turn the consulting into a faith-based nonprofit, which is what we have now, right? Barry Breakers is a faith-based nonprofit. And that opened up so many doors, so many partnerships, institutional partnerships, sponsorships. And that's ultimately how I got on the Forbes list. But it's really been every 6 months has created so much change, definitely in a good way, but also there've been a lot of hard times. There's been a lot of sacrifice. There's been a lot of financial struggle. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm so excited to do this podcast with you is that when people talk to me about how I grew my business and how we grew our outreach, it was through video. It was through video. It was through YouTube. It was through podcasting. I think podcasting has like changed my life.
Yes.
Really everything I feel like starts from podcasting.
Yeah.
And like it just, I mean, I'm not like a whiz with social media or anything like that. I was just talking to you before, like we never went viral or any of those things. It's just good, consistent content consistently, right? Like we just kept putting out information that people needed, that was helpful from a place that was relatable and that made them feel seen, heard, and valued, and that tangibly changed their lives, right? Like you get the right information, you can get into the right school, your life can be changed. My life was completely changed by the schools and the education that I got. And so I was just like that. And now our podcast, we're one of the best 15 or best 10, I think, law school admission podcasts on, Spotify and all those kind of things. But it didn't start that way. It just started as like, I'm just going to keep putting the content out and we're going to just see what happens.
Literally. I think it's so cool to see the shifts throughout your journey. But one thing that I love that you said was that it's a culmination of like all the different things. And I think that's when we get to think about the customer journey, right? Like, how someone finds you versus how they keep binging content or how they get to know you better. I was speaking about you recently and I was sharing like how powerful your live streams were, I think we started working together and I told you I want you to start going live, or you followed my
Yeah.
schedule. I can't remember which one
No,
it was.
you told me to go live every day for 30
Okay.
days. And I was like, I don't know what to do. So I just started praying for people on Instagram
Okay.
Live.
Right.
And
But
yeah.
I feel like you're, even in your Facebook group, I feel like, at some point, like live streaming was so important for you to seal the
Mhm.
deal with people that came in from different angles or different places along the journey. Like, what do you feel about live streaming and what it has done for you? Like,
Yeah, so there is a point when I was going live I think I started in the evenings, but I eventually moved to Fridays at noon.
yes, Friday.
And
That's what I was speaking about, Fridays.
we kept the Fridays at noon slot for a while. Actually, just I think last year is when I stopped going live.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's anything wrong with it, might pick it up again. But I think it was good because there were people that I could interact with in the comments. They were like the same people. Like we never had like a huge live stream audience, right? Like, I mean, I don't know, maybe 30, maybe 10 people sometimes, maybe 40 people at max, but like sometimes it was like 5 people.
Yeah.
Okay. But but they were engaged.
Yes.
People watched it afterwards too. So I think that's the thing. But people still knew that it came on every Friday at noon. And so some people, even if they weren't able to watch it every Friday, there was like that one Friday that they were like, I really need to make time in my schedule to watch Sydney. Even today, like I was talking with one of our students and she was like, it was my first time meeting her actually. And she was like, yeah, but I feel like I've known you because I've watched all your videos. So I feel like I've met you before. She works with another one of our consultants. And I was like, well, I'm glad that you feel that way. I'm the same. I think for me, like I am the same person on camera and off camera. I only have one person. I can only be one person. It's exhausting to be anything else. But I think that authenticity, people appreciated that. I tell little stories about my life or my boyfriend or my family or my sister. And then people really feel like they're getting to know me. And I feel like live streaming helped me just really connect with people and also like to hear certain questions and to follow certain people's journeys. Like some people never worked with us, but they just watched every week and I answered their questions and
Yeah.
they submitted powerful testimonials, even if I never worked with them. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think live streaming is really powerful.
I think it's such a great way to, you know, like you said, you got testimonials even though you never worked with, like you don't know what message or value you're sharing with someone that they really needed to hear. Or some people are further than some people just need that live stream to unlock something and they may not work with you specifically. I think it's good for us to know these things as well. But I
Yeah.
feel like for like if you need your testimonial game to start going, especially if you're a beginner, if you start live streaming, you will start getting live feedback based on the value of the content you're sharing. I think it's so powerful.
Yeah.
So I love
Yeah.
that you shared that. And I'll be honest, it was on your podcast where I first learned how I mean, I know it's powerful and it's funny. When you are the coach, sometimes the things that you'll tell someone else to do, you got to remember, do it yourself. Like we get so caught up in the people that we coach or serving that sometimes we forget the things that really do matter. So
Mm.
on your podcast, which we'll talk about in a little bit, because Sydney has a new podcast. I'm so excited. But what really stood out to me the day I spoke to you on your podcast, because I did an interview on her podcast. My ADHD is kicking my ass today. but was when you told me you would carve time in your schedule to look at me every Friday at like 7 p.m. when I would go live. And
Mm.
it really like knocks me over the head. Like, oh my gosh, like someone actually took time, just like you said, people were carving time out to look at you. And that is so powerful. Like, and this was like last week or the week before,
Yeah,
guys.
yeah,
So,
yeah. No,
so
it's true. I remember, like my friends would be like, we have to go out. And I'd be like, okay, but I have something from 7 to 8. So like, can we do 8 o'clock?
Yeah. Like it just was so like hearing you say that reminded me of the deepest relationships that I created, along my journey have always been live. Like people will find me, which is perfect. But when it's a live stream and I get to connect with you or remember that you came on or remember your name or something that you shared last week or remember your children's names, because these are the things that matter to me. Those are the people that I really build strong connections with. And so I've seen the same thing happen for so many of my clients as well. So I just
And
wanted
I
to
think it's
share that little
because you
nugget.
remembered, like, I think, I don't know, like, no shade to people that have large live streams. I'm sure they're great. But I think it's because I knew that if I went to your live stream and I commented, you would see my comment and you'd respond. So it wasn't just like,
Yeah.
oh, Zaylee's coming on at this time. It's like, this is a time when I can actually talk to Zaylee, right? And she
Mm,
can talk to me. And for me, that was what was really powerful about it. Because if I had a question, I knew I would get my question answered in that hour.
mm,
And I knew that you would like actually directly speak to me. And I think that was a really powerful example of, I think some people go live and they don't actually talk to the people or they don't
yeah.
engage. But like for me, I could have just watched you afterwards if that was the fact. But it was really like, no, I can ask a question and then not even just like, okay, yeah, sure, you can submit a question and you can hear the answer later. But I could ask a follow-up question. And
And
then,
you did.
and I did, right? And so I
Yeah.
like have a whole conversation in that time.
Yeah.
And I think and I never felt like I was taking up too much space or like there are other people too. Like you never made yourself too busy for someone or like, okay, like we'll get to questions at the end or whatever. Like you made us feel part of the live stream. And I think that's why it was so impactful for me.
Wow, that's such powerful feedback. And just anyone that's listening and you're thinking about adding a live strategy to, what you are currently doing, do it. Like when Sydney said that to me, it took me back to, I need to add this back to my strategy. Like, why haven't I been like, going live at a certain time on a certain day like I used to? Like, I really want to bring that back. And then just listening to you talk about it and also seeing how your customers or students or your viewers interact with you and you bringing that back up. It's like, why aren't we doing more of that in this year of
Yeah.
2024? So it's something that I want to thank you for just reminding me of the power of something like that,
Yeah.
because when you're live, like even your conversions, I know it increases because then you get to connect with people, talk to people, they get to know you. And we all know in this space, it's about someone getting to know, love, and trust you, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I love that. That was really good, Sydney. I want you to, if you can share a little bit for someone who has ADHD, but they're afraid of like starting a business first, right?
Mm.
Because they feel like everything is probably a hyper focus, or they probably feel like they never stick to anything, or they're always on to the next thing, or there's just a lot of distractions happening. I see you're nodding
Yeah.
your head like, yeah, I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
And then after you answer that, I'd love to hear some encouragement for someone who is a creator or a creative business owner that might have ADHD too, and they're afraid of like being on camera, like probably messing up or rambling.
Yeah. No, I think that's helpful. I actually think I wouldn't have built this business without ADHD. So
Mm.
I feel like ADHD can be a superpower. I was on meds for a bit. I'm not on meds right now. I think both have their pros and cons.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like I definitely had a lot of hyper focusing. Like I'd go to bed and like I remember daily I'd wake up and be like, I have a new website. And you'd be like, what's
Yes.
going on? I'd be like, I just focused on it for 5 hours and I just built a new website. So, but no, I mean, I think seriously, when you are starting out and when you're a solopreneur, I don't think that you should be afraid of ADHD. I do actually think that it can be a superpower because there is a lot to do, right? There are a lot of hats that you have to wear when you're just starting out in business. There are a lot of roles. There's a lot of task switching that you have to do. And I think that that's where actually having ADHD can be helpful because it's never boring, right? Like if you kind of get bored with one task, as I do often, there's another task waiting for you for you to do. And then when you get bored with that, you can go back to the first task, which for some people, they're probably listening like, that's not effective. But I think it depends on how your brain is. For me, that's effective because I remember the hardest thing about being a lawyer was billable hours. And like when you are billing hours for a client as a lawyer, like you have to do that same thing. Like you can't be task switching like that. It doesn't really work with billable hours. And that was the hardest part for me because I was undiagnosed at the time. I just like couldn't, I was just like, I'm so bored. I'm looking at this long form financial statement. This is like hour 3. I like need to play outside like a child. Like I just like I can't look at these numbers anymore. But I think that's where like I found a lot of creativity in being an entrepreneur and running my own business because I was able to say to myself, okay, I'm having a block right now on this task instead of spending 2 more hours and getting like nothing done, because that's what happens in the corporate world. I feel like, because you just have to push through. I recognize that like I'm no longer optimizing my productivity on this task. I am going to go somewhere else where I'm going to optimize my productivity. And maybe when I'm done with that task or I check something off and I get some more motivation, I'll have renewed focus or renewed perspective for that original task. So I feel like having ADHD gave me a lot of help in that area. And then I think when it comes to rambling and being on camera, well, I had to learn to slow my mouth down because I'm Jamaican and my mouth oftentimes moves faster than my brain. So I don't know if you would say, I haven't had formal media training, but at this point I've done a lot of interviews and podcasting and that kind of thing. And so I think I learned through live streaming, to be honest. I learned to slow down and to think a little bit more like on my feet about what I'm saying. So actually, I think you should absolutely go live all the time if you have ADHD or confused about that, because I do have a theater background, but there's just something about doing it repeatedly. Like it's a skill. There's difference between talents and skills, right? So talents are things that you just kind of like, you're really good at, like singing. I mean, singing is also a skill, but some people just are naturally good at certain things, right? And so, yeah, some people may naturally have more of a camera presence, but whether you have that natural talent or maybe you don't, regardless, you have to work on it to make it a skill, to perfect your craft, right? And so if you're a person that's like, well, I'm not naturally good at speaking on camera, speak on camera more. Eventually, you will get better at it. You will learn to slow down your thoughts. You will learn not to ramble as much, but also rambling is not a mistake. Sometimes great things come from rambling, but you'll get that comfortability and you'll be able to keep your audience focused on one task at a time. Maybe write down I like a good like 3-point, like a 3-point sermon is what just came to mind because I'm in seminary.
Yes.
Like a 3-point video. Listen, we have, I don't know if you're listening, if you understand this, but I have heard some preachers and I'm like, sir, you do not have 3 points. You have 20 million points and you don't even know what they are. Because Here we are an hour into the sermon and you don't know what you're talking about. But you can tell when there's a sermon and like, oh, hey, you thought about this. There was beginning, middle, and end. And so those are some of the things that when you're thinking about how do I keep myself from rambling and doing all of this and that, like have a couple points and then there's some structure that will follow there.
Literally. I love that. I love everything about what you just said. Okay, speaking of skills, you guys know that I am here to teach you the skill of camera confidence. It's just like what Sydney was saying. It's something that you build and you get more confident as you do it as time passes. And let me tell you, Sydney's skill is no joke. I remember we were in an interview on television together and oh my gosh, like me listening to her talk, I was like, oh, the way that she is just quick with it. I love that she's sharing that she built that muscle with live streaming as well. Yeah, so powerful. Absolutely. So Sydney, speaking about the camera confidence class, which was when you took it, Package Your Presence to Profit.
Yes.
And someone told me, girl, that's too many P's.
I liked it.
I thought it was so cool.
I liked it.
But it is now called the camera confidence class. And I always say the people that are in my community that are out there killing it on camera all the time, building their business with video, are all graduates of the camera confidence class. And
Mm.
so I'd love for you to share a little bit about how that class just helped you to maybe start or continue to build your skill of being on camera.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I don't know if I would have taken it if it was called camera confidence. But I was very focused on the profit part.
Oh, wow. I'm going to change it back.
I was like, oh, for profit. Okay, I need this class because I need to profit.
That is hilarious. I like it though. I'm going to put profit in the tagline.
Because I don't think I think it's interesting. I think the class really helped me think about the logistics around video. Like I
Mm,
said, I have an acting background, so performance is not something that I was concerned about. I didn't know anything about cameras or mics or like you can still see they're still up there. My first videos. Yeah. I mean, the content's fine. So that's what matters. And people
that's
still
what
comment on
matters.
them.
Yes.
And that's what matters. But we had no lighting. We had zero amounts of light. Um, and I don't even know. It was just using my phone, which is fine if that's how you're starting out. But like, have a light, unlike me. And, but I didn't know these things. I just knew that your camera quality looked so good. And you always talked about like stopping the scroll, right? And how good video quality, the background, the angles, the depth really elevated and converted, right? And so for me, I wanted to figure out, okay, like how do you actually convert? I didn't know anything, right? Like I didn't know anything about YouTube. I didn't even know about podcasting. I didn't know. I knew that I had things to say. But
Hmm.
I didn't know how to take that knowledge and actually get it in front of people in a way that they would actually find it, and listen and watch it, and then actually convert. And so I feel like that class really helped me. I guess it gave me confidence. I would say confidence that I could be influential on video, not necessarily confidence of just being on video, but the fact that I too could use video to grow my
Yes.
brand is something that I didn't have a lot of confidence in before, and definitely had more confidence in after the class.
Yeah, it sounds like it's all about like camera confidence and technicality, but the class is really, like Sydney said, about you understanding how to position yourself, how to show up, like, how to be a presence or a force. Now I'm like, I need to change that name back, you know, on camera so that you are able to then profit from it, or you are able to begin building a brand or a business. And I think that was one of the first classes that you did with
Yeah.
us, and you took that. And this is the coolest thing about Sydney. She will learn something and she will take it back. She will go hide away and just do all the things and then come back and say, here, this is what I've done. And so just to see you go from, I don't think you were ever camera shy specifically, but just going from,
I
just
was more
under,
reserved though. Like when I watched my
yes,
earlier videos, I was just like, and this is what we're gonna
yes,
talk about
yes,
today. And I don't know
yes.
what I know. I'm so boring. Like sometimes I watch this, I'm like, what is happening? Shake it up a little bit. No, I
Ooh.
wasn't joking around. I wasn't
Yeah.
laughing. I was just like, I am a professional
And now
attention
you're
seeker.
such a natural, like, you're so comfortable and confident, and seeing you do interviews with publications like Forbes, or seeing you just flutter your way around, and even something like pitching, because you were doing a lot of that while
So
you
much
were
pitching.
building your ed tech company. Me as a coach, looking at you do all of those things, I'm always like, look at her. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I had to learn that people won't take me less seriously if I have a personality. I think like at the beginning I thought there was one way to be taken seriously, and I think I was just I'm just going to say, I was looking at all these like boring white men, and I was like, well, they're being taken seriously and they're like, boring white men. So I'll try to be like a boring white man. I'm not a boring white man. Right.
Yeah.
And then I learned like what people actually like my personality. And actually, they still think that I'm smart and that I know what I'm saying. And so I think all of that also came with just confidence in being an admissions consultant, having more success there, getting older. I think when I met you, I was like 25 or 26. And I think I was very like, conscious of that, like, oh, I'm so
Yeah.
young, I need people to take me seriously, and I don't want them to think of me as immature if I'm joking around or laughing, right? I want them to think of me as a professional. But
Mm.
now I'm like, no, I can be both. I can be a professional who also jokes around and is fun, and people actually want that in professionals.
Exactly. We want to know that we're speaking to a person that is relatable, that understands what we're saying, that thinks what we think is funny. Like, we never grow up. Anyway, I want you to tell me a little bit about what you're doing, just your podcast. First of all, before we jump into it, what do you feel about women? Like, what do you feel like we're sharing enough of how God is just blessing us along, blessing and teaching us a few lessons along our entrepreneurial journey? Do you feel like we talk about that enough? Do you feel like there's enough being shared about that online?
I don't think so. So I had the opportunity to meet this really awesome woman who's from the UK. I met her at the Forbes Summit. Her name is Sophie Pender, and she is the founder of the 93% Club, which is a fantastic nonprofit charity in the UK that is helping state-sponsored or students that go to state schools get like networking and connections that the elite class has from being from a wealthier class. And so she's really awesome. But reason I mentioned her is because she had this fantastic LinkedIn post last week where, I mean, she just won the Princess Diana Legacy Award. She's like on stage with like the royals. It's like amazing. She's won all these awards. And she shared like, this is what my week was like. These are some highs, but then she shared some like lows, like almost missing her flight or like sitting in a corner because she couldn't get back to the hotel because she wasn't staying at the hotel that the summit was at because she couldn't afford it, and like someone like opened the door and hit her in the face, so like she's accepting her award with like a splotched face, right? Like she's sharing all these highs and lows, and it was so refreshing because I was like, wow, we actually don't share that. We mostly share the highs, I think, and society has trained us, I think, as women to feel like we can only share the highs
The
in order to
highlight
be taken,
reel.
the highlight reel,
Yeah.
right? Like it's so hard as women. So I feel like we have to prove that we're making it and prove that we're successful. But I think what ends up happening is we don't share the underneath. And then it's harder for other women because then it just seems like, wow, your life is so unattainable. I can't get there. But like,
Mm.
there's a lot of stuff that happens in my life that's not glorious at all.
Hello.
Like a lot of it. I had a whole crying moment earlier today because I
Oh,
was just like
girl.
feeling overwhelmed, and like the laundry is like, I don't know. Like I think death by laundry might be a new thing. But like
Same. Same. Lord.
like, I don't understand. I do it, it's more. I do it, it's more. Like I
Oh
just
my
don't understand.
gosh. Ugh.
Like
And then
if you
it's
want to
looking
know,
at you like, please fold
yeah.
me.
If you want to know when I feel like a failure as a woman, it's like, why can I not just handle like one day without like piles of laundry like just on the floor? Like one day, God. But
Same.
like we don't talk about that, right? We're like,
Yeah.
oh, you're doing all these like great things. So I feel like it's good to share the good things, and we should. But we should also share the things that are not so good because it actually opens the door for someone else
Mm.
to realize that they also can achieve greatness, right? Like
Hmm.
your failures are the way that you make yourself more accessible for someone else to try. And I think that's really important.
I love that. And so I asked that question just before we wrap up. I really wanted to talk to you about this because I feel like it's so powerful. So now you've started inviting those kinds of conversations in your new
Yeah.
podcast. Can you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit
So
about it?
I have a new podcast that's launching called Serenity for Success. You can follow us on Instagram _Serenity for Success. And it is a podcast for kind of busy, ambitious women that are looking to reconnect with God and faith in their daily lives. And I am not an expert at this. Despite being in seminary, I actually really struggle with this. And so I feel like this podcast is more for me than maybe anyone else.
Hmm.
But every week, we'll have short meditations led by me. And then every other week, we alternate between mini sermonettes and interviews from different women and different, whether they're entrepreneurs, some of them are professors, busy moms, what have you, and just ways in which they have had to navigate their faith journey, and ways in which they try to incorporate daily practices of faith into their life. And I think what's so important is that it's not going to look the same for everyone.
Mhm.
Every single person I've talked to has had a different thing that they do. It's what works for one person might not work and probably won't work for someone else. But I just want to give lots of different examples to encourage you to try to connect to your spirituality, connect to serenity, mindfulness, to slow down in order to thrive, I think is really important. And for me, I didn't see enough women talking about this, right? Talking about how they were trying to balance it all. I was feeling alone in that struggle, and I knew I wasn't. And it's been really great to have women come on the show and just share their life and share how God has led them through some really great moments, some really hard moments, times when they actually walked away from God and what that looked like, how they found God and reconnected in their busyness. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about this.
I'm so excited for you. I feel like we really need to hear these things, like you said, because sometimes we think we're alone in something and there are other people going through it, or they have already passed through it. And so you can listen in. And I love that you are sharing different journeys because, it's good for us to try different things and see okay, maybe I'll try her way or her way, but it's all coming back to God. And I love, love, love that. Sydney, before we wrap up, can you dream with me for a moment?
Yeah, let's dream.
What does being brave on video look like for you in the next 5 years if you do decide to continue using video content?
5 years. I think no matter what I do, I'll always use video content. And I'm always trying new things on my own Instagram, which is _Sydney A. Montgomery. I think being brave on video. So I am really passionate about advocating for first-gen students and equity and diversity in education, but also in the workplace. That's generally what my platform stands for. And I think being brave on video is actually me having the courage to use my video to call people out on ways that they're not advancing equity. We're moving into a very interesting time in this country. 5 years from now, we'll be on the cusp of another election, or maybe just right after another election. And I feel like no matter what happens with this current election, this country is going to go through and change in the next 4 years pretty drastically. And one of the things that I struggle with is that I don't like controversy. I don't like saying things that, I don't want the internet hate. I hate it. I avoid saying anything that would upset people. I'm like, love yourself.
No. But if we want change, we have to be honest. I love that you shared that because that is definitely a struggle with people thinking about if I create this content, I'm going to get canceled or,
Yeah, exactly. But I think I have some things to say. I think God is giving me some things to say. I'm not, I'm still praying on it and being discerning. But I think if I'm looking 5 years from now, if I'm dreaming, I do think that I will use video to be known for my positions and that people will hear them and that actual change will come from it. And it might make people uncomfortable and people might not like me. And I'm hoping 5 years from now, I'm okay with some people just not liking me because I will have created and used my voice to create change. And that will be what's more important.
I love that you're always impact driven. Sydney, I feel like this time flew by so quickly. We have to have you on the show again to talk about you being in Forbes 30 under 30 because that's a whole other just exciting.
That's a whole thing.
Yes, that's an episode.
The Forbes lifestyle is a whole thing.
Yes, I'd love if we can just talk about how that happened. Just how it came about, what made you want. I have so many questions. However, I will leave every single detail about Sydney down below under this episode so that you guys can easily find her. Sydney, I'm so thankful that you were able to come onto the show. I appreciate you so much. And I know that the audience is going to love this episode as well. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been, it's been really good. It's given me a lot to think about and I'm excited to come back.
Thanks, Sydney. Bye.
Bye.